So it's the next day, New Year's Day. You can see it went a little bit haywire, but let's take this abomination of a mold off and have a look what we've got. So that's taken off at the bandsaw. This is how we're looking at the moment. I'm just going to take it over to the disc sander at first. Finish the strawberry cable. So we jumped ahead now. Still got this fastener area to take out. Sanded it down. It was looking a bit rough. Cleaned up some of the edges. That's the tail end. And we've profiled around here. Don't know if you can quite see. Yeah. So we've profiled here and underneath here. Yeah, we're looking pretty good. We've just got to put this final piece in here, mix up some resin, use a bit more hot glue down here. Hopefully we won't have the same problem I had before with it spilling over. I was wondering about these areas here. I think if I did any more purple heart discs, it would just be a bit overkill. I did think about also doing some maple discs to stick in here, but again, I don't think so. I think what I'm going to do is sort this one out, mix up some resin, and pour it. Right, so what I ended up doing was just putting a small maple disc in here to tie it to these. It's still got a hole in the center because I had to use a hole cutter rather than that spinning wheel of death. We will just pour these straight. I think that'll be fine. Hot glue just raised up a little bit around the edge just to stop it sort of spilling out the edges there. We've got the resin to mix up, usually with part A. When it comes to brass powder, it's supposed to be, if I remember rightly, anywhere between 5 to 30% of weight, which is fine if you're doing sort of small areas like this. If you're doing deeper areas, it's not so good, because generally what happens is, because this is a heavy particulate, it tends to sink to the bottom. So it'll be fine in here, where it's going to go right through to the other side. It won't be so bad in these sort of trenches, but when it comes to these areas, it's going to have to be a little thicker. So there's two options there. It's either a case of mix it up real thick with a heavier percentage, 50 to 100%, and then hopefully when we go down we'll get a nice brass layer, or it's a case of mixing it up to the 30% and then just waiting for the resin to go a little thicker before we pour it into these fastenered areas. So we'll just get on with weighing some resin, doing some brass, mixing it up. We'll pour these areas first, and then we'll leave it 5 minutes before we start going into areas like this, and hopefully it'll be suspended a lot better in the resin. So we've got to the point now where all our resin is poured. It's been a little longer than I wanted it to be. Due to the cold weather at the moment, the board has slightly capped again, but we've got so far. I'm just going to have to run with it now. I think we'll be able to sort it out a little bit later. It doesn't matter, the feet, we'll work it out. Due to that, the first pour that I did was pretty good, and then I came back a couple of hours later and I'd seen that these areas here in the channels, it kind of all just run a little bit forward. There's only like half a mil, but that does matter. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take 60 grit on the orbital sander, get this back down. We're going to be able to see exactly what our brass looks like underneath, and what it should be is a uniform color. There shouldn't be any sort of dull patches and shiny patches. It should all be the same color. Unfortunately, we're not going to know that until we take all of this down. So that's the first thing we'll do, is take that down, and then we'll come back to it and have a look about sanding off the edges, knocking these corners off. There's a couple of areas up here that you can't quite see. If I do it here, yeah, and you can see where I've sanded just briefly to knock these over. It's not even, so I'll sort that out as well. We'll get this all evened up, and then we'll come back to it. After 5 minutes of sanding at 60 grit and then a quick go of 80 grit, this is what we get to. I just wanted to point out that when I was talking about uniform colouring, this is what I mean here. Little worried about these areas, but I can already see it glinting. The areas you have to watch out for, you can see in the very centre of there, it's not as shiny as the outside. I think that's because there's a very, very small dip where the sander's not getting to. Areas that you really need to be worried about are on here. Now you can see it's got a slight sheen, and then it goes up to this dull colour. And again here is probably more prevalent. You can see the outside, which is either the high spot, which can't really feel with a finger, or what it means is that the brass, as I've been pouring, has been pushed to the side, and you can see it here. That's a good area of brass in there, and then it comes down and there's almost nothing. Couple of ways to do this. So you can either keep sanding and hopefully some of this shine will start to come up. What I would do in other boards is probably take a Dremel again and just by hand take these areas out with a really fine bit and just slowly eat away and then re-pour again. What I'll do now is I will probably go to about 240 and see what the situation is. If it's not good, I will come back in with a Dremel and redo these freehand and take some of this out. It does take about, well, it does take quite some time, but it's worth it in the end to get a uniform colouring. So well, let's go to 120, 240 and see what happens. So in the end I ended up going up to 400 grit because I really wanted to see these areas. I don't know if it's not really picking it up on the camera, but you can see that these areas down here are glinting. That's a sure sign. These areas here are glinting there, but we still have these dead patches here and here. You can see I've marked off where I need to Dremel up to. Now the thing is, when you are dremeling with a small piece, and this is from past experience with brass, you can't just come down and to the point where it stops. You have to go beyond that point to blend it in. Otherwise what you end up doing is exactly like here. Even within this brass, the concentration here could be totally different to the concentration you put in. So you need to bring it in further than you think to blend it. Otherwise, like I say, in the past I've had points where I've just come up to it and thought, yeah, that'll do. And then you polish it and sand it, and you end up with a mark like this here, where it just seeps in and it just looks very, very strange. Everything else though, couple of bits in this crack here, I'm not too worried about that. That center point's come up a lot better than I thought it would, but this is only at 400 grit. So now that I can see where I'm meant to be doing, I'll stop it here. I'll get the Dremel out with a small bit, and we'll work our way back through these channels, straight through the center first, then slowly creep up on these edges. We'll do that first, and then what we'll have to do is obviously put some more hot glue in here, stop this channel up and pour again. Shouldn't take too long, but it'll be another day. That's okay. We've got the Dremel hooked up, and basically I've got the main motor hooked up with a bit of string to the ceiling on a hook, and then we've just got the extension out. And the reason that I've just got the pencil here is so that you can literally see just how fine this point is. and it's necessary because we really don't want to start cutting into the wood. We'll just go nice and slow, just start eating away at it, and we'll get into it bit by bit. It just allows a bit more control, but I just wanted to show you just exactly how fine the point is. Got a whole selection of these bits for varying situations and what I need to get into, but this is the bit that we'll need to get through to these pieces. So about 25 minutes, half an hour's worth of work. We've just gone past these points here. You can see it's been channeled out now. We'll put the hot glue in at these points here and create a little trough around here just to kind of allow it to level and not fall into the center of the board. A little tip I wanted to share with you is the reason that you start in the center. So with the resin here, if you start in the center and drag the line back, as you can see from here and here, just drag it slowly all the way back in the center, it becomes really easy, because then what you do is you just kind of angle the bit ever so slightly and it undercuts. And because the tip is wearing God knows how many RPM, it's creating heat and friction under here. So as you go along, this area thins out, and what you'll find is that it actually starts to sort of peel away. So it makes your job a lot easier in cleaning it up. If it doesn't, it's okay, you know, you've just undercut and then you come back ever so slightly. It just means that you're not cutting in too deep. Just go real slow, and this eventually will come straight to line. So we'll hot glue it, get some resin poured, come back tomorrow. So back in the workshop at late at night, we've been having a bit of a mare with this. A lot of the areas ended up with some sort of cavity. Trying to reroute it just wasn't enough with a Dremel. So having a think about it, I've come back, I've made the channels a little deeper, a little wider. It'll look slightly different, it'll still look okay. You can see here that even though the blend was all the way up to here, that we've still got these pockets and these pits. I mean, very rarely is it perfect. I mean, like in here, areas here it's really good, but even on the same pour you can see it's slightly less in other areas. I'm not too worried about these, that's kind of okay, but these back areas were really quite poor. So we're redoing them again. Then I can come back to it tomorrow and see what's what. I've had to leave the project a few days. I needed some time to think. The back section on here, you can see, is a little patchy. Having finished it off to 3000 grit, you know, I'm not so worried about this. It's, you know, the Falcon's a little bit beat up. So I think I'm just going to leave it like that at the moment, because if you just keep touching it up and touching it up and touching it up, it's just going to drive you mental. So even with the formula of pouring and such, there's other factors you can't control. Even though I put the heat gun over it to expel air, you know, it's been cold in the workshop even with the heater on. There's tons of factors that are kind of out of my control at the moment, so I've just decided to push forward with it. I've done it up to 3000 grit on both sides. The legs you can see on the right, I did those ages ago. The bit of tape that's on the top is where I was putting mineral oil on them and waxing them, and I don't want glue on that area because it's not going to help adhere underneath the board itself. So What you can also see is this here. This is a large board I've got with 3 screws either side. There's one that goes in the center as well, and it's because this table here isn't particularly level, what this does allow me to do is to put a level on it and adjust it and make sure that it's completely level in all directions, so that when I go to put these feet on, everything is perfect. So what we'll do next is I'll level this up, and then we'll start putting the feet on with a bit of glue, make sure it's okay in every direction, and then we'll leave it overnight. So when it comes to gluing these up, it's not a difficult task at all. Just putting some glue in each one of these areas here. I've got these little kiddies glue sticks as well, and just spread it out a little bit, and then what we do is we put a foot or a leg in each one, give it about 20 seconds to kind of gum up a bit, and then we can flip it over, put it on the table, and then even it out and check what the level is like across it all. This is by no means like the be all and end all. It will just give us a really good starting point, so later on when we put some strips of sandpaper down and we rub it back and forth to give it a level, we can check it constantly, and that later is the fine tuning. This is the rough side of it, but yeah, it helps to get it kind of level first off before we go on to the next stage. There it is, the finished product. All we did was just take the feet underneath here, give them a bit of a sand down with some strips on the table, silencer effect, and then we just gave it a nice little bit of a mineral oil finish. You can see there's a couple of areas that kind of work to our advantage a little bit. I mean, the Falcon's meant to be a little beat up. Not totally happy, being a perfectionist, that that's there, but you know, it kind of adds to it. So that's it. All that hard work and all that faffing around has come to this. Well, thanks for following us through this series. I know it was a long and arduous one. If you managed to watch all of it, then you are an absolute legend. I will put up a much more condensed version as well, so that people can just kind of get it over and done with and have a look. But any questions, shoot me a line and I'll try and answer. Thanks.